If I think about the hardest parts of a race for someone that's like getting into something that they haven't done before, signing up is the second hardest, showing up is the hardest, because you will convince yourself you're not ready. And I kind of joke, well, look, for some of these events, you're never ready because you don't know what's going to happen. Just go do it. You'll find out. And if something doesn't work, you take from that, you learn how to correct it, and then sign up for the next one.
Welcome to Creativity is the Job of the Future, where we talk to people who are harnessing the power of creativity to overcome major challenges. I'm Doreen Lorenzo.
And I'm Michael Baker. When we started this podcast, the first person who came to mind for me was Ed Shelton, who's a vegan ultra runner who's run multiple ultra-distance marathons in excess of 200 miles. And the stories that he has shared with me about the things that happened during these events and what he has had to do to complete them, and in some cases survive, were just mind-blowing to me. I thought he'd be a perfect fit for examining this idea of what creative thinking is all about.
Growing up, my parents were divorced, and what would happen during the week, my mother owned a video rental store. I would come home from school on the bus, work at the store until it was time to go home, do my homework, play video games, and that was kind of it. And then on the weekends, going up to my father's place. So I didn't end up doing any sports or anything of that nature because there wasn't any time or ways to do it. You know, if I think back, up at my father's place, I really spent most of my time reading. So like I would just get books and go out to the woods and read for hours. I loved math. One of the biggest things about math, and even like with video games as well, is I learned I was really good at recognizing patterns. I could pick out a pattern incredibly quickly and learn from it and be able to predict it, and would use that to solve problems and think about like, okay, what's a pattern here? And just break that down really quickly and then say like, okay, here's what's causing it. Here's that root piece. So I remember that pretty vividly. My name is Ed Shelton. I live just north of Austin, Texas. Grew up in New Jersey. Did my undergrad in Ohio. Worked in New York City for a couple of years before getting my graduate degree from Carnegie Mellon. Then went out to California for several years before moving here to Austin. I do business analytics in my spare time. I run a lot. I think that's going to be a topic today, but yeah.
Run a lot. We'll work towards defining a lot during this conversation. We're really interested in ways that people are using creativity and creative thinking outside of traditional creative realms, you know, like art production and that kind of thing, in other aspects of their lives and activities. I had recalled a conversation with you a couple of years ago, talking about the death races and some of these other extreme events that you've undertaken, and was really struck by the uniqueness of what problem solving and adapting means. I thought we could start with how you got into these extreme physical events and what that journey has been so far.
Sure. So it was about 15 years ago that I got into running when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter. And everyone was like, oh, you're going to have kids, you're going to gain weight, you're going to go out of shape. So I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to sign up for a race and start running. So I signed up for 2 races. One was a mud run mountain bike relay race, and then the other one was a half marathon. And remember, I did the half marathon, and my wife asked, well, what do you think? And I said, running for that distance just seems kind of boring, which as we talk about like how much I run now, it's really funny to look back on. From there, I got into obstacle course racing and kept looking for new challenges. I signed up for the Spartan Death Race. That's a pretty intense race. 250 people signed up, 150 people showed up, and only 34 people finished. I was one of the finishers. That's when I went to like the next level and said, what's next? And I said, well, you know what? I want to run 100 miles. So I signed up for 2 races the next year. The first race was a 24-hour timed event where you ran half mile out to a cone, turned around and came back as many times as you could in 24 hours. And I did over 100 miles in that event. That was in November 2016. And then less than a month later, I did my second 100-mile race. Since then, I've done a total of 12 between 100 and 200 miles. And then I've done 7 200 plus mile races.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about being a vegan athlete and what that is like. I know that for a lot of folks who participate in these spaces, marathons and ultras, like that's a terrifying idea to them. And people don't really know how to make that work. So I wonder if you could just kind of share your story there.
A little bit of background. I've been vegetarian for about 25 plus years. But I will say, like, when I started doing these events, I did have to think more about my diet, making sure that with the level of training that I'm doing, what are the things that I need that I might not get because of my restrictive diet, those things. So that was a piece. I don't think about my diet as much as a lot of folks do. So I became vegan, I think it was 2020. The reason I switched to vegan is my oldest daughter, also vegetarian, found out she was lactose intolerant. And when you're vegetarian and you can't do dairy, it does actually cut a lot of things out. So I said, you can't do dairy. I won't either for two reasons. One, make it a little easier that you have someone else in the house that's doing this. And then two is, a lot of people are going to say, like, if you're vegetarian or you're vegan, that you're not as strong, you can't do these athletic things and this stuff. And I said, look, anyone ever says that to you, you'd be like, my dad runs 200 plus miles. I'll be fine.
Maybe step back a little bit into the death race, talk a little bit about the structure of those events and what the setup is and how they work, and maybe a few of the details as well in terms of the gear and then that kind of thing.
And the fact that they
Sure.
named a death race. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So the death race, there's actually a couple of death races out there. So this one is known as the Peak Death Race or the Spartan Death Race, started by the same guy that started the Spartan races. So it's kind of part of that same family. This race has a really unique format about it, which is you kind of know when it's going to start and you don't know when it's going to finish. You don't know how long it's going to be. There's usually some prerequisites, sort of depends on the year. Every year it changes. And then there's a gear list. And that gear list for my year, they sent out in parts. So they're like, okay, here's the gear that you're going to need. And then a month later, they sent you more gear. There are some typical things on that gear list, like, okay, make sure you have a pack, water filtration. But then it was also 20 feet of rope, 10 feet of rubber tubing, a coin from your birth year and every 5 years after, bottle of hot sauce, 12 ounces of whipped cream, a sleeping bag, life vest, a shovel, and a couple other things. And yeah, for this race, that's what you're given. And you're given a time to meet, which is when they talk about the race format, the race briefing. The year that I did it, you show up at the race briefing and they were like, okay, this is things that you need to know about the race. This is how it's going to work. So some of the kind of basic rules. And then also make sure you know how to get rid of leeches. And I was like, is this a joke? Okay. I asked somebody how you do it. Then they said, okay, the unofficial start of the race is tonight at midnight. And the official start of the race is 9 a.m. the next morning. They're like, well, you can make a choice which one you want to go to, the unofficial start or the official start. Knowing there would be consequences for waiting, I went to the unofficial start, which is what I think like 99% of people did. From there, you're basically told what you're going to be doing. So the first part for that year was low crawl back and forth half a mile until they put you on a bus. That's what I did. I actually really ripped up my forearms and my elbows. That was actually pretty bad. I ended up with a couple staph infections in that one. From there, they said, okay, official start of the race. Everyone, remember how we told you bring that fanny pack? Okay, put in that fanny pack, whatever you need for the next 24 hours, your water filtration, get your life vest, your rope, and your sleeping bag. And that's it. That's it. No shoes, no socks, strip down to your undies, and get in the sleeping bag and get into that water. That's how the race officially started. The next 12 hours, we had a hike through the mountains of Vermont in our undies, no shoes, no socks, until we showed up where they put our packs, and they actually put our packs in the lake. And we had a couple minutes to go get in the lake, find our pack, and get out. And that's where I learned why they talked about leeches, because that was a leech infested lake, as it turns out. That race, it's over when it's over. So that's where you just kind of keep going until they tell you it's officially done.
Okay, I got to ask, what was that trigger, that spark when you did this and you felt like you had to do more? Could you describe that feeling?
Sure. So I think really it was that first Go Ruck event I did in 2012. And I had been doing pretty well at obstacle course racing. I mean, I wasn't like kind of professional level, but was doing really well and placing now and then. And I did that event, and I just got my butt kicked. I got done with it. I felt like garbage. Everyone like looked at me because I was actually going to Christmas at my in-laws like right afterwards, and they're like, "What happened to you?" And I thought I was in a certain shape. I thought I could handle most things, and I did finish and I did complete it. But I was just like, you know what? I want to do better at it. Like I don't want to feel like I'm struggling. And that's really when I started really doing a lot more events, a lot more training. And yeah, for the next ones, it was just like, okay, I've kind of done this one, I've done this one well. Let me see how much further I can go. And for me, it's about the human experience. I'm like, there's no other creature in the world that's just like, oh, let me try to do something this hard, and then let me go try to do something harder. And now it's about the feeling of the accomplishment, getting it done, the new challenges that show up each race. And with these 200-mile races, every race is different. You don't know what it's going to throw at you. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's exciting and feels great.
You talked about just now, like the challenges and things. And I read some of those, particularly the Chinese mafia chasing you, which is like, where did that come from? Like, whoa. So obviously a lot of challenges come up and you have to absolutely, I mean, it literally is life or death. Like you have to problem solve there, right? Like in the moment.
Yeah.
Talk about the skills you use, talk about what you do. How do you think? Because you obviously also have to be really tired and really exhausted while you're trying to do this. So what does that process look like?
One of the races I was doing, it was a 100-mile self-supported race, which meant like there were no aid stations, there were water stations. You couldn't have pacers or anything like that. And I started to lose my eyesight. This has happened to me before, but I remember running and realizing I was off course and I couldn't see. So to answer your question, the first thing, don't panic. One of the things I say to my kids, I tell myself, calm people live, panic people die. So that's like the first thing. Then the next piece is really about taking an inventory of what's happening, what's going on. So basically listing through like, okay, this is the situation. So on that one, I'm like, okay, I can't see. I can see only to basically my arm's length. I know I'm off course, but I'm still kind of on a main section, and I was on course at one point. This meant I must have missed the turn. So that was one. Next was thinking through my options. One option is to figure out how to get back. Second option is just to sit down and wait till someone finds me. And I thought, well, I'm off course. They're not going to go looking for people probably for another like 8 hours. And I'm kind of low on water and it's getting really hot. So I'm like, that's not an option. So I said, okay, well, let's see. I can see the confidence markers, which are the little ribbons they put on the trails. They're bright colored if they're within arm's length. And I know I hadn't taken a turn. So I said, well, let me just go turn around and go back the way I came until I could find that. Then I'm like, okay, now I found the confidence marker. And then thinking through the problem is like, okay, now I'm back on course. Now, what are my options? In most of these situations, I think about how do I get to the next step and worry about everything else later. One of the things that I learned doing the Go Ruck events is you don't know what's going to happen next. So don't worry about the longer term piece in the situation. Worry about what's next. How do I get to the next aid station? How do I get to the next confidence flag? How do I get to the next break? And just get there. And then from there, you figure out the next piece. So that's kind of how I break it down.
At some point, did you ever say, I don't want to do this race. I'm done, or I've had enough? Or are you just wired now to say, I'm doing this no matter what?
There was 2 races that I was very close to quitting. One was the death race. I had hypothermia. I was very delusional. I did have a crew. My wife came out to crew me, and I didn't know where I was. I had gotten so cold. I was shivering and then stopped shivering because I was like soaking wet. And this was an area where you could have crew. And my wife saw me and pulled me aside into the car and kind of like sat me down. And I don't remember much. All of a sudden, I remember saying, like, was I just talking nonsense? And my wife and someone else's crew was in the car, and they were like, yeah. I was like, okay, at least now I know, like, I was just making up total nonsense. I didn't even know we were in Vermont. And my wife got out of the car, opened the door, pulled me on, and said, go finish your race. That was probably one of the closest I came to not necessarily quitting. I think I would have just fallen asleep in it, just quit that way, not like actually like tapped out. I just would have not gone back. The other race, it was a race I was looking forward to. And then they moved the locations and pushed the date out. It was at a location I just don't like to run in, and was not looking forward to the race. I was just like, well, I'm just doing this because I signed up for it. I had no motivation for the race. Got to, I think, about mile 20, and I started feeling sick. And I said, okay. And these were like 6-mile laps, I believe. They did one lap there and started feeling kind of sick. And then did another lap and started actually like dry heaving on the lap. Got done. I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna quit. Like, I was pretty confident my daughter had some sort of stomach bug early in the week. I was convinced I had it too. Went up and went to drop, and they were like, no, it's too early. I was like, I've done enough of these races. I'm pretty sure I've got something. Of course, I said like, oh yeah, my daughter had a stomach bug, and all the people took a step back, and then we're still like, no, it's too early to quit. And I was like, fine. And I got back and I sat down. I said, okay, I'm going to have something to drink, something to eat, see how I feel. Did that, didn't get sick. Said, okay, I'm going to run the next lap. If I get sick on the next lap, I'm definitely out. I've got something. If not, then I'll do one more. I did that, and I did one more. And I was like, at this point, I'm finishing the race. I was miserable for the rest of the time, but finished. Because at that point, I was like, well, look, I've made the commitment to myself. If I was able to make it through that lap without getting sick, I'd finish the race. And that's what I did.
What about injuries and things like that? I mean, how do you fight through that?
I really listen to my body during training. If I feel like, hey, I'm overdoing it or feel an injury coming on, I adjust my training immediately because I don't want like an injury to take me out of a race that's coming up. During the events, I've broken my hand at one of my races. I've degloved a toe. But one of the jokes I have, and people that have done events with me have heard me say that, I'm like, that's a Monday problem. I'll deal with that on Monday. Right now, it's about getting to the end of the race. So yeah, in all those situations, I've always just been like, I kind of joke to myself, yeah, that's a problem for Monday, not now. I've only DNF, did not finish one race, and that race I ended up with rhabdo. That is essentially like your muscles start breaking down and releasing toxins into your bloodstream, so can lead to kidney failure and even death if it's not caught early enough. I was actually misdiagnosed at the race, which was very dangerous, but thankfully, like nothing bad happened there. After that race, a lot of my muscles had broken down. I had a hard time walking around. For that one, it was about like, okay, how do I get healthy? And then I did have some moments of like, should I keep doing this? Especially after I found out I was like misdiagnosed at the race, and I should have went right to the ER, and I didn't. I sat there, drank a bunch of water, and went to my hotel that night. After that, I felt very weak. Mentally, I also was just thinking, should I keep doing this? Bigfoot 200 was already on the calendar, and I said, okay, Now, what I need to do is just train for that race, look at what took me out, what happened, how do I get stronger, how do I get better. I will say, like, it gave me a goal. I think the biggest thing was just being patient and waiting till I was ready to make that big step to running. It's tough, but I'm just like, okay, I can't let this get worse. I got to let it heal and get better. And I take that time that I was running and training and those type of things, and I figure out how I can use that same time to help me with the next race. That could be using that time to stretch or using that time to meditate. One of the big things that I incorporated into my training is meditation. In these really long races, for a long time, you'll be in the woods by yourself in the dark. And are you okay with that? Are you okay with being by yourself with your own thoughts and realizing like you're not going to control what you think about? So, a big piece for me was learning how to meditate, learning how to let my thoughts happen, because that's what's going to happen on the trail. And that's helped a huge deal.
So, kind of next creative problem solving question here. So, how are you dealing with each of these challenges? You don't know what they're going to be. They're telling you to strip down and then call on your knees for who knows how long. Like, so how are you kind of working through those? I mean, I gather that it's like, well, you just do the thing that's in front of you, but how do you adapt on the fly to some of those challenges?
It is definitely like, how do I make it to the next point? And in that, it is a lot about taking the inventory of what is potentially going to take me out and what isn't. And then looking at what's going to take me out, like, how do I minimize the risk to that as much as possible? For me, on, let's say, like the death race when I like tore up my elbows, honestly, a lot of it was just ignoring it, which sounds terrible because everyone was coming up to me and just like, dude, what's up with your elbows? I'm like, I'm fine. It's just dirty. And yeah, no, they were terrible. But when I was in one of these timed races, for instance, one of the things that happened there was, I don't know what's going to go wrong and because something will always go wrong. But in that race, it was humid and I got really bad chafing. It was bad. It was like pretty early in the race. I was like, this is potentially going to take me out because of how like painful it is and how bad it is. And so there I'm like, how do I solve this? Like, I've got to figure out a solution here. Just putting more of the body glide isn't going to work. It's just too humid. I'm sweating too much. So started thinking through, what do I have back at my little drop bag area? And I had Leuko tape, which is, kind of like medical tape that you put on stuff. But that's not going to stick to my body. I also have super glue. That's like, well, super glue will work. So I super glued the tape to all the parts that were chafing, and they stopped chafing at that point. That was definitely one of those, that's a Monday problem. I'll figure out how to get this tape off on Monday.
So when you talk about things that could take you out, is it sort of situations like that where you would be somehow like physically unable to continue?
That's definitely some of them. One of the other races, my hydration pack broke. For a lot of these races, you need to have your hydration pack. It needs to be able to hold water. I need to have food and calories. So my hydration pack, my vest, the bungee cord that keeps it together on the back snapped. So I couldn't wear it. I stopped, sat down, examined my pack, and realized I could tie up the bungee cords a little bit to keep it going. I did that, kept going, then it snapped again in a different spot. And that whole time in that race, I was like, okay, how do I fix this pack? I don't have a spare pack. So as I was going, I was like, okay, well, all I need to do is find a string or a rope or something. And got to the aid station area, which was also the start finish, and saw that they had a sample medal hanging up. And I ran over to the guy and was like, can I have the cord off of the race medal? They're like, okay, here you go. Use that to rig up something to hold my bag together so I could still wear it and finish the race.
How common is it in your experience to be in situations like that where you have to find a solution with what's available? Have you done that away from aid stations? Like, literally banging rocks together, like stuff like that to kind of get, like solve whatever the problem is and continue.
I do remember one big one. This was Bigfoot 200. I was running it self-supported, and I had put gear in various drop bags. And I put all my cold gear further in the race because I figured, okay, I'm not going to need it in the beginning. I don't want to carry the extra weight. I'll put this a little further out. And it was dark. It was getting kind of cold. I was like, okay, I'm fine. I'm just kind of keep moving fast. And then it just started pouring down rain. And then that rain turned into sleet. I didn't have my gloves. I was wearing like a short sleeve shirt and shorts. I was like, this is bad. This is real bad. So in that situation, one of the required gear that you had to carry was an emergency blanket. You can use the emergency blanket in a lot of different ways. So I got underneath a fallen down tree. I didn't have anything to cut it with. So I figured out almost like a toga vest thing that I used it to wrap around the core to keep my core warm. If I keep my core warm, I can keep going. I mean, yeah, my hands get numb and that kind of stuff, but I wrapped that around because that's all I had and made it to the next aid station. I think I had a jacket in the next aid station, so I was pretty happy about that. Turned out my gloves were 150 miles in. And I was like, cool when I don't need them. But yeah, since then, there's a couple things I have learned to bring with me on these long ones. So one, always have that emergency blanket. I actually now do carry scissors with me, and I carry crazy glue. That combination I found will usually solve most things.
Do you think of yourself as a creative person?
Good question. I think so. I mean, I definitely feel like I come up with interesting solutions, both like at work and some other areas. I don't think I would describe myself as one, but I feel like I am creative, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense to me. And I'm sure it makes sense to Michael and Rebecca too. I mean, what you have to do creatively on the fly is pretty impressive. It sounds like you're thinking while you're still moving and running. It's not like you stop and go, well, I'll have a picnic and we'll figure this out and I'll get a little rest. And it's constant. Do you find that everybody that's involved in this type of, I'm calling it a sport. I really think it's kind of like a death challenge. But anyway, this kind of sport um, is similar?
It's interesting. I think if I look at the ultra races, I think there's probably quite a few that are. So one of the things that I found that's interesting and different and is a kind of a fun, unique challenge is I do these races unsupported. So I don't have a crew. I don't have pacers. I do think that other folks kind of think this way, but one of the things that's really like, I think helpful for them is they have those that crew and pacer, so there's someone else that can help solve the problem, or they can have more solutions available. For instance, like my bag breaking, like or my cold weather gear, for instance, I could say carry this to each one, and it's always there for me. I think one thing that's really nice though is there are other people out there on these trails. You usually like if you wait a couple hours, you'll see somebody. Other folks can come up with like ideas and solutions as well. So I think there's a lot. I think it depending on if you're one that runs with a crew or not, you'll definitely have more challenges to face without one. So you got to be ready for it.
Is there a reason you don't run with a crew?
The first time I did one of the races, it was just like a scheduling thing. I couldn't get a crew together. When I went to do Bigfoot 200, I was planning on having a crew. I had family in the area and they were supposed to help. Something kind of happened at the last minute and they couldn't. And I said, well, all right, I guess I'm just doing this crewless. Since then, it's like, okay, that's an interesting challenge, more that you have to think about and deal with and plan and prep. Some folks think like I'm against it because I never have a crew. And I'm like, no, I'm not against it. It's just, it's one of those things like I know I can do it on my own and there's that extra challenge. So I tend to lean that way. But if I can easily put together a crew, I would. But I also like, I can do this myself. So
Have you surprised yourself over these years, like starting this 15 years ago? Has this surprised you about yourself, or did you know that you could do all this?
I think the first 100 miler that I finished, I will say like I was surprised at that because it was a timed race, 24 hours. I wasn't planning to do 100 miles. I just said, I'm just going to keep going. A lot of it was about testing my gear for the 100 miler that was coming up. And in a lot of ways, I was like, I don't know if I want to run that far because I don't want to burn myself out for that next one. I ended up taking second place in that one. That one was a surprise because I had no plans to do that. I do put together a plan, but definitely one of the biggest things I learned is like your plan doesn't matter. Have the plan, be prepared for it to change. It's not going to work out as the way you think. One thing that surprised me is I still haven't figured out where I'm going to sleep ahead of time in these long races. Of like I'm going to sleep at this aid station, and I never do. I always end up sleeping at some other ones. So I kind of go in and like, here's my rough outline, but just know like it's going to change, and I don't want to get too focused on that plan because then if I'm not hitting it, I'm going to look at that negatively. And I don't want to think about that negative piece, right? Like, oh, I'm not hitting my plan. It's like, nope, my plan's changed. Now I got a new plan. Always adapting like that.
Over these 15 years, you developed just, it seems like a lot of skills, creative, survival, thinking process. How do you think that translates into your work life, your personal life, other than running, have those skills translate? Not that you're, making all your kids tie their backpacks with, strings that they find on trees, but how do you think that's helped you? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I'll just share a quick anecdote. So my youngest daughter finished 1,000 consecutive days of burpees. So definitely one of those things that I've kind of tried to teach my kids. The idea of consistency and training. She literally was like, right on, I'm now 4 digits. But yeah, I mean, a big piece is the idea of remaining calm and not panicking. So in work situations where something doesn't go right, right? Like we release something or something goes wrong and all our numbers are off. It's like, okay, well, don't panic. Let's look at this situation, break it down, and how do we solve this? And then with like bigger projects, a lot of it is, okay, here's our bigger project in mind. Here's our plan. The plan's going to go awry. So whatever we have planned might not work. So like, how do we keep moving it forward? Those things I've taken into work. I think the other thing too, and I've definitely heard this from other folks, is I don't really think anything's impossible. So like they come to me with something, and I'm like, we can do it. We'll figure it out. It is that idea of like, yeah, it's all possible. We just don't know how to do it yet.
I love that. I think that's so great. Really, I mean, that's just a great attitude to come out of it because it really is all possible most times, and people get so flustered by it. And I'm sure you think, sometimes you think this is difficult. I just was covered with leeches. I really do love how this has turned into just using problem-solving skills everywhere. And I think we're so bullish on that everybody has this in them. And maybe they're not faced with life and death situations, but everybody has it in them. And I think that's really exciting to hear how you do it.
I mean, one of the big things that I've definitely taken in different parts of my life is this idea of we're going to face various challenges or various obstacles, and knowing that how do you think about like that next piece? Like, how do you adapt? And knowing that a lot of that is mental. One of the things that definitely causes people to quit is they think what's coming up is harder than it is. And they've kind of convinced themselves that they can't do it. This insurmountable task. It's like, well, is it? Am I thinking about it too much? We can control so much of whether we're going to keep going or not. There's real limits, but one, they're movable. They're not always the same. And do you really know if you're at that limit unless you get there? And therefore, keep going.
Following this interview, Ed Shelton finished the Arizona Monster 300 in 114 hours and 15 seconds, beating his stretch goal by almost 6 hours. During that time, he wore one pair of shoes and one set of clothes, lost 12 pounds, slept just over 7 hours, drank more lemonade than he had in his life, did not lose his vision, barely had any hallucinations, but did see one erotic cactus, and wrote on Instagram, "Honestly, signing up for a 300-mile race was a scary idea. I wasn't sure how I'd do, but I wanted to find out. I would like to say the chances of dying or being seriously injured are pretty low. Plus, I might get to see a Gila monster. This was hard, it was humbling, and it was worth it. I'm proud of this one." Creativity is the Job of the Future is produced in Austin, Texas, with help from Audrey Holm, and hosted by Doreen Lorenzo and Michael Baker. I'm Rebecca McEnroy. Thanks for listening.
So the leeches, sprinkle salt on them. That will let them disconnect. At the end of the day, you might just be pulling them off. Biggest issue, though, is the blood doesn't clot because of what they basically inject into you as they're like sucking your blood. So yeah, that's what I learned.